All right. So my name is Oyemi Fumudo. I am the IT support at iBez. So you're welcome to
Hi, Yemi.
yeah, you're welcome to
Do I just say Yemi?
Oyemi Fumudo.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're welcome to Man Crush Monday series. This is the first episode, and you're the first
Wow.
interviewee. So yeah, congratulations.
It's an honor to lead the way.
Yeah. So Man Crush Monday series is a spin-off of the Woman Crush Wednesday series. That it is a show that appreciates and encourages women in STEM and talks about their achievements and encourages them generally. So the Man Crush Monday series is a show that talks about and encourages women in STEM by men. So a brief introduction from me
Okay.
of you. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, from your LinkedIn profile, because I went through your LinkedIn profile, I saw that you studied engineering, but now have successfully transitioned into investment banking and now infrastructure financing. So would like to hear from you how you did that and how that has been for you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's it's quite hard to sort of know how to sort of present this. I would say that the majority of your viewers, I guess, if they're looking to go into engineering, into science, technology, or even into mathematics, were probably not born when I graduated. So I am presenting, uh, a world before mobile phones, a world before a lot of the things that I guess they take for granted now. So without sort of further ado, we had O levels and A levels, and I was very much science-based, science and mathematics based. In those days, back in the day, it was very hard to get into a science-based subject or subject that had any sort of bearing of science without some science and definitely without mathematics. So I studied mathematics, double mathematics, physics, chemistry, and I went on to study engineering. And that was pretty typical in that time for what you would do to study engineering. Also, I guess other people, if they're going to other STEM subjects, would stick to the mathematics, the biologies, the physics, and the chemistries. So somewhere between those four exams at A level, you could sort of move into whichever science field you wanted, depending upon where your emphasis was. But maths, physics, and chemistry was seen as a very sort of solid basis for going into the non-biological sciences. But you could even become a doctor with it, but you'd have to sort of do something at the time. So I did maths, physics, and chemistry, and I did engineering. And the engineering that I did was very general, but it probably bore more of a relationship to applied mathematics, to be dead honest. So it was very mathematical, very theoretical, and by definition, engineering is meant to be more of the practical of the sciences. I did that for 3 years, graduated, and then I did a postgraduate in what would be manufacturing engineering. So there was always that engineering base. Okay. However, at the time when I came out after 4 years at university, I went into finance. And at the time, there were a lot of scientists going into finance because there was a feeling that it was becoming more mathematically based, and it has. So over the past couple of decades, it has become exceptionally mathematically based. But at the time, it was a little bit, not too unusual, but, a lot more scientists and physicists were going into finance. And essentially, to be dead honest, it's a lot of the same mathematical skills. Very much a lot of the models that one did in more of an applied physics engineering background that I did at university, we were remodeling to model, I guess, how stock prices moved, how interest rates would move. And the mathematics is all the same. So the basic assumption of the mathematics of how a stock price moves is Brownian motion. So anyone who's a physicist watching this would sort of understand, this is a Brownian motion distribution. So there was always this example of trying to find the mathematical model which best modeled whatever financial phenomenon you wanted to model, and to overlay that with various other mathematical techniques to model securities prices, essentially. That I did for a while, and for quite a long while, probably about the first 8 years of my career, I guess, was sticking to the mathematical side of finance. And then after that, I went into consulting in Japan, which was more consulting to banks, but consulting in probably a bit like IBES and systems and technology. So essentially, a lot of the mathematical modeling that one does in banking needs to be backed up by computers. And obviously the computers of about 2 decades ago are very different to the computers now, but it was still the same basis. It's all very much what I would call the applied side of mathematics rather than the theoretical side. Which model fits best? And there would be that movement more towards how you mathematics. It's a concept of risk. So this balance between risk, which I guess, if I was to use a mathematical term, is the expectation of your portfolio returns, and between return, which is the expectation of your portfolio, and the risk, which is how variable your returns are, was something that was always being modeled and being reviewed up to real time in banks, essentially. And that same basis over the last 2 decades has just become faster, larger, quicker, more complicated. And I'd say I'm probably a dinosaur if I was ever to go back to that element of finance. After that, I was working more towards the system side in modeling how securities would be treated in portfolios. So it's all the same. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. The very first early parts was using the mathematical tools I learned in engineering and applying them to the worlds of finance. Okay. In 2005, I returned to Nigeria just to look around, and finally came back in 2008. Now, to be dead honest, in 2008, there was nothing in Nigeria that I did that resembled what I did in the UK. Absolutely nothing. Even today, there's nothing that sort of compares to what I was doing 20 years ago in the financial fields. Oh, wow. But the mathematical tools still can be used for a variety of things. But that being said, I probably, as you get older, you don't actually need to use that sort of same level of mathematics that one has, and use it or lose it. Let's be dead honest. So the requirement for mathematics has dropped, and I sort of returned back to more traditional engineering to look at the power sector, the energy sectors. However, my expertise in there is not an expertise of knowing the engineering, knowing the behavior of transmissions or knowing the behavior of generation. I haven't got to look about thermal capacities or thermal efficiencies of various things. My focus has been on the financial side of engineering projects. And that's what I've essentially been doing for more or less the past decade. So it's physical engineering to financial engineering to software engineering to back to physical engineering again. And that's essentially, I guess, what you may see if you look at my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. Okay. So you've talked about how you transitioned from engineering to investment banking and now infrastructure finance. Now, what was the journey like? Was it easy? What were the challenges you faced along the way?
When you're starting off your career and you're an undergraduate, you've got a very large amount of very specific knowledge that, to be dead honest, you're never going to use. I mean, if you're, let's say, you're not going to use unless you stay in the very niche field of science that you've studied. So, going back to the fact that I was saying a lot of what I was doing was the mathematics that I've learned, it wasn't the most complex mathematics. It wasn't the more, the harder problems that I'd solved. But it's having that basic toolkit of mathematics that helped me. Now, you can't, when you progress in your career, being the subject specialist, you need to also take on more general skills, administrative, managerial, and those more general skills can apply whether you're a scientist or not. So at some point in your career, you have to make a decision. Do you want to hold tightly on to looking through your microscope, to analyzing mathematical numbers, or do you want to understand and manage those who will look through their microscopes and do things like that? So that's a decision for everyone to make. It's very rare to see someone who's, 2 or 3 decades into their career staying completely and wholly in the more technical side. I guess there's faster CPUs that are younger than you to process that stuff. And your skill would have been the years that you've spent working in the organization, being able to work with people to create solutions. You've spent the first 2 decades of your life solving solutions by yourself in what's called exams. As soon as you graduate, that stops, unless you're a very niche player. And you've got to learn to solve more practical, more applied problems in a team. And that's a different set of skills. And once you start talking about having more people, the P word comes in, politics. So it's all very well and good being a wonder on calculus and doing that, whatever. If you can't convince the various hierarchies above you, then there's only so much that can do. And the skills in being able to convince other members of your organization, other members of your team, are very different to the skills of passing a 3-hour exam.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to pick up those skills somewhere.
All right. So do you think a female engineer would have had a similar journey, or would they have found it difficult?
Like I said, it's a question of the timings. I know a lot of the, well, okay, first of all, in my engineering course, it was renowned for having 7 men for every 1 female. So there weren't that many female engineers to start off with. But a lot of the female engineers went into similarly numerate fields like consulting. And, in fact, a lot of the engineers from my course went into consulting companies, more so that went into finance. And that's because you have a more generalized problem, but you have an analytical way of thinking and looking at things. And I think they would have had the same sort of decisions to make. Do they want to branch more into the managerial oversight? And those opportunities would have been presented to them. Obviously, the issue is that, how does child rearing bear? And that will have a massive view on how one plans one's career. In the finance world, I can honestly say that there's very little difference. That if you're prepared as a lady to cope with the investment banking world, it is pretty much, it doesn't so much matter who you are in the investment banking world. To be very crude about it, if you bring the money in, you can be a psychopath. They'll still employ you. It doesn't actually matter. So there's a different set of metrics depending upon the jobs that you want to do. If you are someone that brings in the revenue, either as a salesperson, a deal maker, it doesn't matter. You will have your job safe, but increasingly now, people are looking more I sort of read reviews about toxic personalities in teams, and that wasn't too much of an issue in my day. You could be as toxic as you liked, your organization set free. So it has changed. Like I said, this is something that's been I graduated over 30 years ago. So it's very hard to equate even the current environment to the environment that was the case when I just graduated.
Okay. All right. So, in your career journey, what has been the representation of women in the workplace, not just at the bottom or the middle level, but also at the top and in the boardroom? Do you think women are well represented, or do you think
You know,
sorry, hold on. Do you think those that have progressed to the top levels have merited it? You can go on. Hello? Can you hear me?
if 1 in 7 are female at the beginning of this operation, how many do you expect to be there at the end? Okay.
Right.
Now, that was the fact at university. So the real question you should be asking is, how do you convince more women to start into this pipeline? Okay. Now, if you have a starting or an exiting from a university of 7-1, it's very hard to now say 30 years plus on, why are there no women? Well, there were no women at the start, to be dead honest. There were very few. And proportionally, do they get fewer as one goes up? Yes, they obviously do. So the 1 in 7 that was there when I graduated, I don't know what it is now. It's going to be less. But because I've been jumping from finance fields to engineering, whatever, then all of those fields, finance, engineering, software, they are male-intensive professions. Obviously, you know, all of those professions are professions done by sitting on a desk and using your head. They aren't professions which require you to flex a bicep or lug something physical. So there's no real reason why women aren't represented. But like I said, when you start off with a 7-1 odds against you, it's hard to now expect that at the end of it, it's going to look anything like 50-50.
Okay.
Unless you believe in some mean reversion for the mathematicians watching.
All right. So, would you say careers in STEM are for women?
Current STEM? What do you mean by current STEM?
Careers in STEM.
Oh, I mean, yes. I mean, it's like I said, you know, one of the interesting things, and I don't know whether you've looked at the analysis, is that when you look at STEM subjects in, say, the Middle East, in Middle Eastern universities, the 7-1 that I had in terms of at my university, I'm not saying it's the reverse, but women are in the majority in STEM subjects, I think, in the Middle East. And partly that's because I think the men go off and study religious studies or something like that. So there's always a cultural preference. I think similarly, if you look at Asian universities, there's a higher percentage of females. There's a strong cultural component, and it probably starts at an early age. You know, I'm not going to say that, you know, you should stop your daughter with a pink Barbie doll or something like that and give her an airplane instead to play with. But there are, you know, the fact that there are definitely strong cultural factors that can move that 7-1 in more even, you know, in more even standing. Yes. Now, does that mean you can move it 1-1? You know, I'm not going to get into this argument on the internet. You can just Google, I guess, Jordan Peterson or a whole bunch of other people, and the same argument can be used in women-dominated activities. The catch is there anything stopping someone who wants to get into the STEM as a female from getting into them? Only their grades. Right. And from what I can see, women get the grades just as good as men. Yeah. Whether they have the inclination to go into those fields, I don't know. And I don't know what makes those fields more attractive to men or what makes them less attractive to women. It's something that someone has to do research on or do some sort of studies. I'm sure people have. And even after all the sort of like decades that I've been working, people are still going to be arguing about the fact, quite frankly. But to me, it's always been about grades. I've always been in organizations that have stressed that achievement, even to the point of not worrying about how well you get on with other people. And it is broadening, perhaps not as quickly as people would want, but you can point to other countries that have near 50-50 ratios. So there isn't any, it's clearly no genetic reason why not. There probably are strong cultural reasons why people tend to move in that direction. And if we want to allow people the freedom to choose, then we have to sort of respect if their choices don't line up as 50-50.
Okay. Okay, so why do you think women shy away from the STEM careers, and what do you think stops them from studying engineering and other STEM courses?
I think it depends upon what you mean by STEM. If you look at medicine, for example, in the UK, I think it starts off quite even between the genders, and there's a greater demarcation between doctors who go to hospital and doctors who do what's called like general or primary medicine. So primary medicine is you're a general practitioner or a family practitioner, and you meet up with the customer. Second and tertiary healthcare are more hospital-based. Okay. So when you look at, say, primary healthcare, that's predominated by women. And when you go to secondary and tertiary, it's less so. And that is because of job flexibility. Right. We've just had 2 years of COVID. I think there's been that has shattered assumptions for how work is done globally. Yes. That I think that, whenever you change assumptions, that is, outcomes never return to where they were. We're on Zoom right now. We don't have to, we don't have to be in a meeting. Even for my current work, the idea of not having physical meetings is just a lot more productive. These gains in productivity are going to allow people to work very differently. And the ability to work differently and to have more flexibility, I think, will, balance, as it were, what I would call the age ambitions of the genders. Okay. Obviously, around the age of 21, both genders may look at the next 5 years probably quite the same. At 25 to 30, that changes. At 35 above, that changes. And the roles that one has in the non-work aspects of your life. Yeah. So it still is the case culturally, wherever you are in the world, that women are going to be more so the domestic caregivers. Should that be the case? I'm not getting into that discussion here. But if work is more flexible to allow that, or to similarly allow men not to turn up to work, then I think we will see, changes in how work is structured. I mean, I'm giving you the description of the last 30 years plus of working in my particular field. The next 30 years will be completely different. And the way that I worked and the way that I'm working now, it is clear they're no longer going to be dominant. And if they're not dominant, something's going to take its place. And that's going to allow a rearranging of priorities and a rearranging of resources from the one-person company all the way up to the global multinational. Okay.
All right. So, do you think our educational system properly prepares women for corporate work?
It doesn't properly prepare anyone for corporate work. It's not just women. I mean, what do you need for corporate work? It goes back to what I was saying. The problems you solve in education are problems that you solve as an individual. The problems that you solve outside of education are rarely solved just as an individual. There is a question of team. Is there a way to work in teams? Yeah, probably there is. Do you learn them at school? Well, only if you probably do sports, and that's very different. That's sort of the teamwork or the understanding that, you can be a superstar, but your team can still lose. So no, it's not a perfect preparation for the corporate world. But then, like I said, I don't think it's a perfect preparation for anyone. So I think both genders are equally disadvantaged in that. Apart from, you may argue that the environment that most women will go into is male in certain industries, definitely in the STEM, but that isn't so the case in a lot of, like in the creative industries. That's definitely not the case.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's been your experience working with women?
I've had women working as my subordinates, my peers, and my bosses. For me, there's no real, there's obviously a different in individual styles, but it's never ever sort of like popped to me in any way as that this is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You can see people for whom it is a problem. I've also worked with people who are younger than me, who are male, who are my bosses who have been younger than me as males. I've also worked with people who my bosses have been women who are younger than me as well. So there's very much a difference between the person who's doing the role and the role that they're doing, and how you interact with, first of all, the role, or how you interact with them as a person. That's part of the things that they don't teach you how to do correctly on an exam paper.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be, what determines how successful you are in your career. And that's the politics side, how well you get on with people around you, whatever they may be. They'll be definitely be of different backgrounds, different views and opinions. And given all those differences, you've got to find the similarities such that as a team, if you are working as a team and you're not trying to, sabotage each other, how you get it going. And that's what I'd say would be more critical. It's more critical that you find a constructive work environment. And then put you in a different team, and you may enjoy the team more but be less successful. We can put you in another team. You may get on badly with them and be a better team, and be a better team as a group. The question is, which of those two non-optimum ones would you prefer? Let me ask you that question. Would you much rather be in a successful team where you don't like your team players, or would you much rather like your team players and be in an unsuccessful team?
I'd rather be in a
Do you have an answer? Okay, then you can get along with toxic characters. You can all shout at each other, but get the job. But those are the trade-offs you have to make, and there isn't a right answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to learn which of those ones are you prefer to do. And as you get older, your preference and your tastes in how the people you work with and how you work will also change. And there isn't one fixed view. So, I really like this remote working. Not everyone does. And the 2 years of COVID, not everyone's happy with it. I'm quite happy with it. I actually like the fact that, you can get things remotely working. The flip side is you can't escape. So for some jobs, you'll not be able to escape.
Yeah.
You're always going to be in contact, and that may not be something you like. So the technology has changed and made it more flexible, but the whole of work has changed. And I guess from a psychological point of view, us humans haven't changed. So we're going to have to, all the tools around us are changing, the environments are changing. And as we know, if you can't change as fast as your environment, the odds are you're going to become extinct.
Right.
So try not to become extinct in your career choices.
Right.
It's the best advice I could give.
Yeah. Okay. So, what advice would you give to girls that want to go into STEM careers?
I'm going to revert to my usual self, which is, these things are very broad. But, let me just give the following thing. I have 2 daughters. They're very young. I have no idea whether they'll choose to go into ballet, read the classics, and play the violin. Those are things that I just can't do. Love them, enjoy. So I'm sure there are girls out there that enjoy science, enjoy technology, and and enjoy that part of it. I don't see why they can't or why they shouldn't, because it's very much sort of an intellectual puzzle exercise when you're sort of at school learning about science. You have that curiosity about everything, and the whole essence of the sciences is understanding that world around you. Engineering is a little bit different. One of the best phrases, and try to understand the world as it is. Engineers look at what the world could be. So engineers are always thinking about creating something that doesn't actually exist. The airplane didn't exist. The physics behind it always did. It was discovered and the airplane was invented. So in understanding the wonder about the world, are you more sort of interested in finding discoveries, in which case veer towards the sciences, or are you more interested in creating, in which case go towards more the engineering? And the sciences do sort of break up into those categories of discovery or invention. And you've got to decide which of those pique your curiosity more. I mean, I've always found it amazing to just find out about, things you never knew before. But there is something very different in creating something by yourself, whether that is a software program. And in that creative side, I think there's a lot of resemblance to what people would think are the more artistic sides.
Right.
So, you have people who say, this looks like beautiful code. And they can look and go, yeah, that is beautiful code. But when you compile it and wrap it up, no one's going to see it again. No one's going to see it again. And the person that hacked it and it's still working, you can't tell the difference. But that part of you that I suppose is part of your character that likes seeing things a certain way will come through in your work. And if you do have that more creative, inventive side of trying to solve the problems of the world, then yeah, you tend more towards engineering. Maths and medicine, well, really, I can't really talk too much about them, but to say that one is even more towards the discovery of the world as it is, and the other one is a mixture of the both. So STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. If you have that sort of character that likes invention, that likes curiosity, and if you have probably a very good teacher that can inspire you, then I can't see why those subjects are not available to you, because I think they appeal, and they're different sciences and they're different engineering, so there's different levels of mathematics. They appeal to certain character types. Yes. And yes, those character types may occur more in, if you excuse me, the male brain than the female brain. But when you go to the more softer of the scientifics, to the more the medicine and the engineering, even the technology, then there's no reason why that sort of balance between the discovering of the world and the invention of the world, you can't find your own balance between them. So there's no reason why. And like I said, I'd like my daughters to go into the STEMs. There's no two ways about it. But they're more than welcome to go into the arts. It's just that they'll have to expect dad to be a Philistine in those regards.
All right. Okay, so it's been a great and very insightful conversation. What are your final words of encouragement for women in STEM already?
In STEM already.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've managed to be suckered into going into STEM, and they go, now we're stuck in this subject. It goes back to that your preferences will change with time. What you studied at school is very specific, and going in 5 days a week solving problems is very different to how the problems you need to solve in the workplace. But training that you had in STEM, and in more ways than one, it's very useful. I would think that definitely in the general population, I mean, what percentage of the population actually takes STEM up to graduate level? It's a very small percentage. So regardless of whether you're male or female, it's a very small percentage. But if you're in STEM, I'd say stick with it, because there are new branches of STEM arising every day, new branches. And one of the more interesting things would be to take what you know and move across into another field and see how that applies. So never let go of your STEM completely. If you find that it's not quite for you, just look around. There are a few related branches, and you'll find that those skills will be very much appreciated in what I would call a neighborhood discipline. You know, the ability to model mathematically is, you know, has been something that I've seen through in all my jobs, just to varying degrees. I would imagine similarly for people who have computer programming skills. You know, the skills you have picked up in STEM will apply across a wider range of fields than you would imagine. And a lot of those fields are changing. And a lot of those fields are more and more looking for what I would call interdisciplinary experiences. So those skills will last you a long way. It's up to you to figure out what experiences you will have in your own career that will feed into each other and compound to allow your career to grow. Unless you're a wonderful politician at work, in which case it doesn't matter what you do. Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Mr. Ebipere Clark. We are so glad that you made out time of your busy schedule to join us. And to the viewers, thank you for sticking with us till the end of the show today. International Women's Day is tomorrow, and we promise to have something special on the channel tomorrow as well. So you definitely want to stick around and see what we have in store for you. Till we come your way again tomorrow, have fun and be inspired.
Absolutely. Be very inspired and inspiring.
Yes.
Be inspired and
be an inspiration as well.
Inspiring. How's that? Yeah.
All right, Mr. Clark. Thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much. And happy Women's Day to everyone.
Yeah.